I'm going to be doing some weird looking as I make this video. Sorry for not making eye contact more directly with you, but I'm going to be looking at the assignment itself so I can hit some of the ways that students struggle with this assignment. So here we go. Your final project is an essay that is not anything like any essay you've probably written before. Most of the essays you've written before, you've probably approached from the perspective of high school, where you have a 5-paragraph essay, or it might have more paragraphs, but you just treat it like a 5-paragraph essay, where you have an introduction, and then your thesis is in the introduction, and then you have body paragraphs, 1, 2, 3, 4 maybe, and then conclusion where you restate your thesis. None of that is going to happen here. To begin with, your introduction will not actually include your thesis. The thesis statement for your paper, in essence, is the argument you will end up making, and that's going to come way toward the end. Your introduction might at some point allude to it, but it's not going to start out with saying, here's the thing that I'm going to prove. You're not doing research, you're writing a research paper with other people's research. And that's a distinction you'll want to keep in your head as you work. I will stop here to say that if you haven't already, you need to grab a piece of paper and a pen and take some notes about the stuff that I'm saying. If you have the ability to print the assignment, you could even take the notes right on the assignment, since I'm going through the document as well. It's going to be invaluable to you to be able to refer back to what I said without having to watch the video again. And the video is there for you, so if you need to watch it again and again, you certainly can. So your final project takes your research issue, examines where it came from, examines how scholarly sources have answered this question, and then you finally get to make an argument of your own, something many of you tried to do way back when we were still putting together questions. I'm going to write a paper about, and then you would say this thing you believed to be true. You finally get to say, after you go through presenting your reader with the question, why it matters, and then what scholars have found when they ask this same question or some version of this question, you get to say, what I now believe is true is this. And here's the hard part. You have to go tell us why. Some of that might include because this author, and this author's research suggests that's the best answer. And you might say, because the research that I've read so far combined with the real life examples that I've seen in my CNA career suggest that, and any host of other things as well. So here are the big moves you're making in this paper. You're giving us why the issue matters. And again, the issue is not the question. If my question is, are vaccines a viable alternative to disease? My research issue is not whether or not they're viable. My research issue is the history of vaccines, whether or not people take them, what controversies exist about vaccines, all the background information on vaccines that I would need to have my reader understand why this question is situated in a broader context. So the big moves of your paper are, you're going to give the background and context of the issue you've been dealing with. Then you're going to say, here's my exact question within that context. Then you're going to say, when I go look at the answers that scholars provide, I find at least 3, and you can have more, but you can't have fewer, at least 3 different ways to answer this question based on the research that's been done so far. Presentation of first answer and why, presentation of second answer and why, presentation of third answer and why. And then in light of all that information that I just learned, I now believe that. That's the thesis statement, basically. Here's the argument I will make. And here's where students flub it up a lot. The next 3 or 4 pages are, and here's why I'm right. Drawing on research, drawing on anecdotal evidence, etc. So I've already covered that you need to not just start jumping in and saying, here's my research question. You need to give us background on the research question issue. Tell us who cares. Why do they care about this? Why is the issue complex? Why is it important? Um, you want to talk here about things like who would even care about something like this? And it's really important that you not present that information the way I just said it. So, in other words, you don't say vaccines are important. The people who care about vaccines are nurses, doctors, people living in poverty. So you want to be more academically appropriate than that in the way you word things. So in other words, you would say that same thing by saying the issue of vaccines is one that is important in American culture because it's not just the healthcare industry that is impacted by whether or not folks are vaccinated. It's also folks living in society who maybe are more marginalized, who don't have the economic stability of regular health care, et cetera. So you're going to say the things without telling me, and here's where I'm supposed to say the things. You can start there. Like if you want to start writing your paper that way, where you're just answering the questions I put in the outline, go for it. But remember that that's your shitty first draft. See, that is quoting someone, not cussing. That is an Anne Lamott. And let me know if you'd like a copy of that essay because it's awesome. That's your shitty first draft that will be revised and massaged and brought up to formal academic English by the time you turn it in the rough draft. So start there by all means. Start by using my outline as just plugging stuff in that's basic surface answering of my questions. But remember that that is just your first swipe. That's not what you turn in your rough draft. So after you do that background stuff, you're going to talk about your question and why your question is your question. Why is it interesting? Not just why is the issue interesting? Why is this question interesting? Why do we need answers to this question? What answers do you think you already have about this question before you started this project? Why did you have those answers? Then you transition into saying, I did the research. Again, you don't say it that directly. I did the research and here are the answers I found. Now, I've already gotten a couple of emails from folks saying, holy crap, I didn't find any answers to this question. The absence of answers to the question is still a question being answered. So in other words, if I'm working with a project where the question is, why are Christian apologists more likely to become Buddhists? And I go look at the research and nobody has even asked that question, let alone answered that question, then how I write my paper is by saying, at the point where I talk about my scholarly answers, no one has thought of this question apparently before because there were no scholarly answers to this question. Then I present what I did find. Scholars are talking about why Christians become Jews. Scholars are talking about why Christian apologists become atheists. Scholars are talking about how Christian apologists end up joining religious orders, but I did not find why or how Christian apologetics is related to Buddhism and the conversion to Buddhism. So that's how you would present the different points of view if you found that none of your research directly answered your question. Some of you had direct answers. Some of you did not have direct answers. If your situation is such that you did not have direct answers, now your argument becomes perhaps, but maybe not, because it could be you came to a different conclusion. But one way you could approach your argument is to say, this lack of information needs to be filled. And then your whole argument would be, why do we need to understand Christian apologetics in relationship to Buddhism? And how do you suggest we go about doing that research? How would we put together a project that actually tried to answer that question? What kind of researchers would be appropriate to do that kind of work? Where do you see that work being situated? Is it the work of psychology? Is it the work of religion? Is it the work of comparative religion, etc.? And then that leads us, after you have entered the conversation, here's what I think based on everything I've learned. That leads us to your conclusion. And I'll note here, just as I did in the introduction part of your outline, these are not conclusion paragraphs where you just restate all the crap you said and then restate your thesis. This is not what's going to happen. Look at the articles you've been reading. They are an excellent guide for what it is you're going to do. In the introduction, you're going to say all the things that need to get said to make your reader on the same page with you diving into your project. In your conclusion, you're going to sum up not everything you already said, but what you found, and again, why it matters in terms of your interests and in terms of scholarly interests. The best thing you can do is exactly what many of you resisted when you first started reading academic articles. You got to the conclusion and you're like, why did they point out all of the flaws with their articles and then just state a bunch more questions? And I get it. You were taught in high school, you never ask a bunch of new questions in your conclusion. That's true when you're writing a 5-paragraph essay and you should have answered those questions, but it's not true when you're talking about research. When you get to the end of research, what you should come up with is, wow, now that I understand all this, what I understand even more is that I need to understand all of this as well. And so listing questions that would be a good guide for research going forward is an incredibly effective tool in your conclusion for a research paper. Again, it's all in how you do it. You don't just list a bulleted list of, now I need to know this, 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 and this. You instead conceptualize those questions in the conversation. So in other words, you say, now that I understand the way Christian apologetics works within the framework of multiple world religions, what I understand is that I need to ask a slightly different question to take this any steps forward. I need to stop focusing on Christian apologetics and start thinking about it as Christian approaches to ecumenism. And if you don't know that word, it's a really great word. You should look it up. Ecumenism. I need to understand Christian approaches to ecumenism if I'm going to understand why it is that certain Christians convert to certain other religions. So you don't necessarily state the question as a question. You might consider instead stating those new questions as things we still need to understand, which are statements instead of questions in terms of how you would write them in your conclusion. The bottom line is, no matter how much I put in this video, no matter how many minutes this video is, and I'm trying to keep it under hopefully 15. I'm looking at the assignment, so I don't even know what my timing is right now. There's never going to be a way that I can give you answers to all the questions you're going to have. You are welcome to email me with questions you have about this assignment. Couple of things. Make sure they're questions. When you make claims about what you don't like or don't understand and then put a question mark at the end, that's actually not a question. And the only reason that matters is there's no way for me to respond to you in a way that's helpful because I am not being given what you need help with. I'm being given what you're unhappy with. And the only thing I have to say to how unhappy you are is, I'm so sorry. And I am so sorry. So I'm not being a stickler about you asking questions because it needs to be a question because I said so. I need you to ask me questions if I'm going to be able to help you. And that's the role I want to play with you. I'm willing to listen to how frustrated you are. And that role is something that I am not going to walk away from. But it's not a very helpful role to you. The more helpful role to you is to be able to answer your questions so that you can move forward in your thinking and your work. So try to frame what you ask as an actual question.